Hello, welcome to Meet the Candidates. I'm State Senator George Latimer. Tonight we're going to have a conversation with candidates for Mamaroneck Village office who will be on the ballot this November 3rd. We have with us the Democratic and Mamaroneck first candidate for mayor, Dan Natchez, and running for the position of village trustee, Thomas Bert. Dan, Thomas, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
It's great to be here, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thomas, let's start with you. This is the first time you're running for office, and I'm sure the single most frequent question you get asked is, why are you running?
So I grew up in a coastal village, not much different from this one, and when I moved out here to raise my kids, and I didn't really think I'd ever become involved in local politics. And 14 years on, my oldest son is going into homics this year, and I've got twins at Mamaroneck Avenue School. I find that more and more I'm somebody that people who are my friends and neighbors come to become involved in local issues and pay attention to them, tell them if something's going to affect them and do something about it if something needs to be done. I started out doing community stuff with the Constituents Committee on Day Laborer Issues, where after the settlement from those events of 2006, one of my neighbors came to me and said, we need somebody to serve on a board, protect the village and protect day laborers and make sure that we comply with the settlement. And I did that for about 3 years, and after that I found I was just paying more attention to what was going on around, and since then I've remained involved as the district leader up in Harbor Heights, and I figured that it was time to take on a bigger role.
And certainly balancing the professional career and the family as well as public service. That's always quite a balancing act for any of us. So, Dan, you've already served on the village board. You've been a village trustee for a number of terms. You've served as deputy mayor. Why are you running for mayor? What do you hope to accomplish?
Well, I've lived here all my life. I love this village. What we need to do is protect our neighborhoods. We need to keep the quality and the feel of our small maritime village. We need to stop the cost overruns that we are spending millions of our tax dollars. We need a full-time village attorney, and we need to be able to work with all of the residents, not just some. But when people have problems, and this village does have problems, when we can come together collectively, we can work together and solve them. And we can listen to each other and talk with each other in a meaningful and rational way.
Now, because you've had the experience you've had over many, many years, you've had a chance to see the scope of lots of issues that have come before the village over the years. It certainly seems that the most emotionally charged issues are those that are land use issues and things that involve development, and development that some people consider good or bad. How do you make the decision in your own mind as what is good development and what is bad development?
Well, George, as you know, my profession is land use management. I've represented developers all over the world. There's a big difference between smart development and any development. And the village has to decide what development it wants, not the developers. And we need to concentrate on protecting our neighborhoods, keeping the quality of life in this village, keeping the maritime image, keeping our vistas. And when I am mayor, we are going to follow what is necessary to provide the guidance so that to developers and to our land use boards in order to have that. And I want to make clear for the record that when I am mayor, neither myself nor anybody in my staff will be representing any developers before this village.
You know, George, I said before that I grew up in a place not too much different from this. There's a sense of place. There's a soul of a place. It's usually not one thing, and it can be hard to articulate, but you know it when you have it. And developers see that, and they think, well, a lot more people would like that, so I'll just build a lot of units and a lot of floor area, and I'll sell it. And everybody can enjoy this, and by the way, I'll make a lot of money. And they've got investors or lenders to serve, and so they always want to swing for the fences and go for the biggest development possible. And you can let them do that for a while, and then you figure out that the thing that you can't articulate that was the soul of the place is gone, and you sold it, and you can't get it back. So, like Dan says, you have to have development driven by what the people there want and believe is organic instead of whatever developers think is a good idea.
Given that sense, Thomas, how do you judge what's happened over the last 6 years in the village?
I'm troubled by what's happened the last 6 years in the village. I think we have a failure to think long-term. To the extent we think long-term about development, we think whatever developers want to build must be a good idea, and that's kind of thinking I don't endorse. I also think that we have an administration that's dropped the ball on significant issues, including Jefferson Avenue Bridge, and I think we are building up a track record of not doing well with cost management for municipal contracting, and we've got some of it ahead of us, so we better do better.
Dan, any thought about what you've seen in the scope of the last period of time?
Well, what we don't do is we don't listen to our residents and talk with them before things happen, before we pass laws. What we do is we happen to pass our laws and then talk to the residents afterwards. We are not as attuned to neighborhood issues. We're not as attuned to cost-benefit analysis, and most importantly, we don't look long-term. We have a problem, we do a little fix, a Band-Aid with some chewing gum, hopefully it goes away. But for every action, there's a reaction. And if you really start thinking long-term, that's how you put things together. That's how you come up with a plan for what you want for this village, 30 years from now. The LWRP was a great example of that. TOD is a great idea, but a poor implementation. We've increased density, we've decreased the setbacks, we've decreased parking, and what that does is it's going to have box development, which is what we are seeing and the village is falling victim to. And what that does is mean that we're going to be the Bronx. And I can assure you that when we are in office, that's not going to happen, and we're not going to have the Bronx approach to life.
Let me move into the next topic area, because there's plenty of things for us to talk about given the restrictions of time. There have been many complaints about the issue of parking on Mamaroneck Avenue. There's a committee working on it right now. How do you see the process we should take in trying to solve the parking crunch?
Well, we do have a citizens committee made up of people from all walks of life, and that's important, and what we need is to have their input. But conceptually, one of the biggest issues is that parking on the avenue is a privilege, and there are employees of different establishments that abuse that privilege by staying on the avenue, all day. And so what we need is some type of incentive system to get them off. So if you're on the avenue for longer than a reasonable period of time, we should be raising the rates and making economically undesirable and having lower rates off the avenue. We also need to give real thought to how to enforce it, and well, I want to hear the views of the committee. I'm not a big fan of pay by plate. I'm a big fan of pay by space. It works well in other communities, and it's very meaningful. So together we can solve these problems, but we shouldn't be doing things without bringing everybody into the fold and talking about them and letting them know afterwards.
Thomas, anything you want to contribute as well on this topic?
My memory of course, parking has always been a little bit tight, but my memory of how this became an issue in the current iteration is that the mayor raised this issue of having a robotic parking garage and raised it a few times. And I think anybody who's taken more than a cursory look at that realizes that it's really not a workable solution. They're not meant for that. They're meant for storage, and they don't cycle quickly enough for a dinner rush like we experienced in downtown Mamaroneck. But I think when that didn't go anywhere and kept coming up, that was part of the impetus behind getting the Walker Group in. And of course, like your usual boring but important municipal issue, somebody who really knows what they're doing came in and made recommendations. Some of them are very good recommendations, and it should be sort of a non-political issue that goes to a committee to figure it out, and then we vet with the community if any of the recommendations are really problems and just implement them. I'm afraid it's going to get politicized during this election, largely because elections tend to do that, and also because I think the mayor got very married to an idea that doesn't actually work.
Okay. Dan, let's take into account your knowledge and experience as president of the Shore Acres Property Owners Association. Many people know you for your time and tenure on that. On your time frame, your watch there, SAPOA has sued the village. Why?
When the village makes a mistake and breaks the law, it's our duty to get the village to recognize it and bring it to the attention and preserve and protect our neighborhoods and our village. No differently than the state sold a 0.59 acres of land, that's over half an acre of prime waterfront property to Mamaroneck Beach and Yacht Club for a total of $10,000. Heck, I would love to be able to buy a quarter of acre or a half acre or even a third of an acre on waterfront property for $10,000. That type of thing should not happen. And when we are in office, the village will not be having a double standard. It will be following all of our laws, and it will be following the procedures necessary to protect our village and protect our community and maintain the quality of life that we have all become accustomed to. One of the big problems that happens with either that or developments that go astray is people say after it's been done, why didn't anybody do something about it early? Mm-hmm. Well, that's the responsibility of citizens groups, and that's why SAPOA sued the village. That's why it sued the state. It is important to understand, that these will be adjudicated by courts, but we are very concerned about following our laws and following the procedures. The law is very clear. Mm-hmm. This is, and that's why we've done it. But similarly, on development issues, when you have development, our business model that we've come up with in our firm shows that you can have low density, mixed use, which is much more valuable to a community like ours, mm-hmm. and much more valuable to developers.
Now, you're articulating a vision in all of these things. How do you implement the vision?
You implement the vision very simply by getting together with residents, listening to them, finding out where there is commonality, building upon that. You can form consensus and try and work forward. We did this 30 years ago with the LWRP, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
When it was created. And it has worked magnificently and is used for a model throughout not only New York State, but many other states of what is involved in terms of coastal zone management. We don't do that now. The new LWRP rewrite that the Harbor and Coastal Zone Management Commission is open to the entire village, and over 35 people have come and been part of that. I think that's important, and that's how you build a consensus. Not that it's what you want, not that's what mm-hmm. I want, but what we collectively together want, and then build the framework to go from there.
Sure. Thomas, your corporate experience has given you a good input in this.
Well, I wouldn't call it corporate experience because much of what I do is suing corporate America. My history as a litigator is that on behalf of stakeholders like investors or mm-hmm. consumers, when corporate America does something they're really not supposed to do, we take action to preserve the stakeholders' rights. And that's what I've done for almost my entire career in private practice. I think what I can tell you about litigation in America, where, as Tocqueville said, everything ends up in court, there's no foolproof way to avoid being sued, but the best deterrent is to do things right the first time. Mm-hmm. And I think as a village, we've ended up with our tail really in a wringer several times in the time I've lived here, usually because we've done something that we ought not to have done. We need to do two things. We need to not do that, and we need to also have a full-time village attorney.
Thomas, you live in Harbor Heights, and you obviously have lived in the community for a number of years, but it's a wonderful community with lots of different neighborhoods. We've mentioned Shore Acres, there's Heathcote Hill, and there's Old Rye Neck, and Top of the Ridge is one kind of an environment to live in, and Orient is another kind of an environment. But you're going around, you're knocking on doors, you're talking to people, as you do in your everyday life. What are you hearing from people? What kind of concerns are they raising with you? What's their take on the present and the future?
One thing I hear a lot is civility. I think there's a sense among folks who have paid close attention to village affairs that we've lost that. That we should all be friends and neighbors here. Even when we don't agree with each other, even when we get mad at each other, we should remember that we're all friends and neighbors. I go to school to pick up my kids, and these are my friends and neighbors, even if I see something differently from how they do. And I don't want to have a village board where somebody turns to somebody else and goes on a tirade and calls them names. I don't think we ought to operate that way. There's a lot of the issues in this village are neighborhood to neighborhood. That one's not. That's about all of us.
And Dan, because you have served on the village board before, now if you're successful, you get the gavel in your hand. How do you help create that civility?
For somebody to get up and talk in front of the village board, particularly for the first time, takes a lot of energy and a lot of emotional stamina to do so. That needs to be encouraged, not discouraged. One of the problems that we have in government is government, particularly in this village at the moment, doesn't really want to listen to people. They only want to listen to some people. What we need to do is run a meeting in a fashion that does not allow name calling, does not allow denigrating anybody, encourages them to express their ideas. If they have questions, give them answers. If you don't know the answer, tell somebody, we'll get back to you with the answer. People raise many meaningful and reasonable questions at board meetings, and they're not answered. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not quite true. Some are answered if you happen to be in the right friends and family approach to life.
George, your question earlier about how you do the work of getting to the vision reminds me of what Mario Cuomo said. You campaign in poetry and govern in prose, right? What I think is that one thing we need to do is give more guidance to our local boards. We put them out there to do the work of figuring out, like you said, the most emotionally charged issues. And we ought to tell them how to give us what as a village we need, and I don't think we're giving them a lot of guidance right now. The other thing that I think we need to be doing is, in this village, it seems like we often pass something and then talk to the residents about it. And it's not that it's not that it's so much hidden as that the outreach is not effective. We don't aggressively try to make sure people know what's going to affect them. We just sort of throw it on the website and hope they figure it out. And that doesn't work well. We need to be more aggressive in our outreach to make sure people know what's going to affect them. Dan and I were talking not long ago about the changes to the parking or to the traffic pattern around Mamaroneck Avenue School. Mm-hmm. And that's, of course, my school district and my neighborhood. Nobody really knew about it until days before it came up. These are the kind of things that we can't be surprised when people get upset about that.
Just on that
Please,
point, you know, at a board meeting, I raised the question, has anybody talked to the neighbors? And our mayor said, well, I've talked to them. And I've said, you've talked to all the neighbors? Only ones that needed was the answer, or something similar to that. We need to go talk to people. We changed the zoning map, and I said, well, if you're changing the zoning map for people, have you talked to them and let them know? They may have input, they may have concerns. We need to do that. We need to take a step back, take a breath, bring people into the fold, let them know what's going on.
As the time winds down, we still have a little bit more time left. Thomas, since you haven't run for public office before, tell us a little bit about your family. You've alluded to your family and kids. You don't want to go home without shouting out a positive to your wife and your kids. So why don't you take that opportunity?
I could. You've met Carrie. I couldn't do it without Carrie. Everybody in the MAS district knows Carrie from her work on the play, which is an amazing production, and she's looked after the kids and helped out with costumes and a bunch of other things through the years. Mm-hmm. All the Harbor Heights folks know her. My kids, Alex is going to be 12 this winter, headed into Homics. And my twins, Chloe and Lucas, are rising 4th graders. They amaze me every day. I get to see this window into little people becoming adults. They learn like sponges. They expand to fill all their potential a little bit at a time for years. And it's a process that I can barely even describe to people. My kids wait up for me, even if it's 10 o'clock when I get home. I've told them they got to stop during the school year. They're going to get too tired. I derive so much from them, and I look at them and I think they're going to look around at their world as they get older, and they're going to realize that there's a lot that needs done and needs a lot of help, and they're going to look to me. And someday when they get to be, 14, 15, and they figure their old man doesn't know anything, they're going to wonder what I did about it. And I figure I ought to be able to give a pretty good account of myself. So that's what I'm trying to do. But when I decided that I was going to put my name in with the nominating committee, mm-hmm. a friend of mine came to me and she made the one argument that there was nothing I could say to. She said, I know how you are about your kids, and I know how you are about teaching them about public service. There isn't a better example you could set. There was nothing I could say to that.
It's very powerful stuff. Well, as you mentioned your kids, I'm happy to mention that in about 5 weeks I intend to be a first-time grandparent. So
great.
my daughter, who's
Congratulations.
thank you, approaching 30. It's sobering when you get to that age, Dan. I'm afraid you and I are a little older than Thomas is. So, but
Well, only chronologically.
only chronologically. But that is in fact what all of these things are about. It's trying to create a Mamaroneck that will not just sustain us during our lifetimes, but for the next generation, and for the generation that comes after that. And there may be people that we don't even know, will not ever know. But it would be the Mamaroneck that past generations built on, that we would build on from there.
But as you go around this village and you talk to people, the harbor, the waterfront is the main thing that people can all relate to. And that's something that we need to really focus on and maintain. And that's something that we do, but we don't do it as well as we should be doing. There are a lot of people throughout this village that have views of the harbor from all areas of the village. There are a lot of people who use the harbor both passively and actively. I happen to be a very active user of the water. It's one of my passions of life. But that's the greatest asset that we can give our great-grandchildren, is to preserve that and preserve the access and preserve the feel of the openness that it gives us.
There's a wide range of issues. We still have a few minutes left. There are the basic services of the village: police, fire, very active and effective volunteer fire department, sanitation, recreation. Are there any other issues you want to pick out at this moment that you'd like to talk about or comment on that you think reflect sort of your values as you look at the opportunity to run the village?
I just think the overall message that I think we are trying to say is that we need to listen to everybody. We need to involve people. We have a tremendous number of great volunteers. Sometimes we listen to them. We don't listen to all of them, and I think that that's a mistake. I think we need to have a better relationship in that regard. We need to go forward and be much more progressive in how we approach both our fiscal management, in our day-to-day operations. And there'll be mistakes made, but right now, when a mistake is made, the policy seems in the village to surround the wagons, and rather than saying, okay, we goofed, now let's make it better. I enjoy people coming and saying, I have an idea. We need to encourage that more.
So we were talking before about the soul of the place, and in addition to sort of the appearance of it and the things about the waterfront that we all love, there's a place that we fit within the broader Westchester community that I love, that we are more diverse economically and demographically than some of the surrounding communities. We're more affordable than Scarsdale and Larchmont. And I love that, and I value that. I think we're more of a broad community, and I think we get a lot out of that. My kids are at MAS, which has the strongest concentration of Hispanic voters in the village and the strongest concentration of Hispanic kids. And my wife actually speaks Spanish, and the kids are just starting to work on it. She learned as an exchange student in Argentina when she was in high school, and it's been slow with the kids. But they get some immersion at school because a lot of their friends are Spanish speakers. And just as one example of diversity in the village, and I think we should value that and maintain it. I think we have to make sure that economically and demographically we're serving everybody in the village equally, and that's very important to me.
So we're just about at the close of of this conversation, and this is a conversation that's going to continue until November 3rd, and the voters will have their opportunity to speak then. So let me give you the exit question. Thomas, first to you and then to Dan. The decision of the voter, they're in the voting booth. They don't pull levers anymore. Now they blacken in little squares, little circles. Why should someone vote for Thomas Bert for village trustee?
Because we need new management, and because I think the priorities that I bring to the table are more consonant with what the villagers care about.
Dan Natchez running for mayor, same basic question. Voters in the voting booth, they have their little black pen out, and they decide which of these circles they want to blacken in. Why should they vote for Dan Natchez?
Because unlike the current administration, I listen to people. I want their ideas. I want to work with them and bring a collective approach to moving forward in a meaningful and long-term vision. Everybody talks about fiscal, management. We're spending millions of dollars in cost overruns. Jefferson Avenue Bridge is over $2 million in climbing. You have that with other projects. We pay for that. People say, well, we get subsidies from from the federal government or the state government. That's still our tax money. We're still paying for it. There needs to be a better approach on a long-term basis, and I think that's what I bring to it. I've been here all my life. I've served on the board. I know more about what goes on than many people here. There are ways of doing it better than we are, and for 6 years we haven't been doing that. So that's what we need to do.
Gentlemen, thank you. And we've been speaking with the Democratic and Mamaroneck First candidates for village office in this November's election. And they are, again, running for mayor, Dan Natchez, and running for village trustee, Thomas Bert.
Thank you very much.
And you will see them, as I mentioned, on the Democratic and the Mamaroneck First lines on the ballot. November 3rd is Election Day, and between the time that you're viewing this, whenever you're viewing this, there will be a number of debates. I assume there'll be some televised here on LMCTV. There'll be community meetings in some of the different neighborhoods, and we would encourage you to go out, listen to all the candidates, get a chance to make an assessment for yourself. On Election Day, it's not the presidential race, it's not the governor's race, so you won't have some of those high-profile races ahead, but you will be electing the mayor of the village that you live in, for those of you who live in Mamaroneck Village. If you live in the Rhine Neck section of Mamaroneck, you will also have town races for town supervisor and town council and so forth. If you live on the town of Mamaroneck side of Mamaroneck Village, neighborhoods like Orienta, Heathcote, and Harbor Heights, there are uncontested races, but there are still candidates on the ballot for Mamaroneck Town Supervisor and Council. And so there's a little homework that we all have to do, which is to go out, learn about the candidates, learn about the issues, interact, and on Election Day, cast the vote that you think is the right vote for your community. I'm State Senator George Latimer. Thanks for tuning in. There'll be additional episodes of Meet the Candidates, and you'll have a chance to see these gentlemen and the other candidates running as well. But thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day.